Hey there, this is Joe. I'm the CEO here at OpsLock, and in this video, I'm going to be running you through how you can create isolation plans that will run your team step by step through the proper way to isolate specific pieces of equipment or systems, and the type of information you can capture in those plans to help things kind of happen safely and securely every time. So let's get started here. I'll make myself a little bit smaller. We've got a couple of options if we want to create an isolation plan. One option is we can click here on our company page, and either at this level, on the company level, or by clicking on one of these work sites, we can scroll to the isolations view, and here we can click on new isolation plan. Here, one of the nice things about this is we're able to create isolations for systems that might not include whole pieces of equipment. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So this is one way that we can start an isolation plan. The other way, and a way that we would encourage you to do, is to follow the inventory path for isolations. And let me run you through that quickly right now. So if we have an isolation, in most cases, that's going to be that we have a piece of equipment we need to work on, and we want to lock down that piece of equipment before we work on it. So what we like to do is we organize these plans around those pieces of equipment. The way you add a piece of equipment to our system is here in the inventory. So here you can see, for example, let me add a secondary fuel pump. We can describe it if we want. Maybe we copy the manufacturer's description from their website or something. We can identify where this equipment is stored. Using our location hierarchy, we can say how many we have. Maybe we have 2. I'll just leave 1 for now. We can identify if this is an asset. So it's a piece of equipment, a component, which is what an asset is made up of, or a part, which may be a piece of an asset or a piece of a component. So those are our 3 options. I'm going to leave this as an asset. So we'll create this, pretty quick to do. And then when we visit this piece of equipment, this is where we're able to create that plan that shows us how to isolate our secondary fuel pump. The way we do that is we press edit, and you can see here that it says isolation plan not required. And that's the default option when you do create any piece of equipment. If I want to create an isolation plan here, I simply tap on this. I can give it a name. So I would say secondary fuel pump. If there's more than one, if we have a multiple quantity, we could say main deck, or something that helps us understand what this specific plan is for. When we do that, we can save it, but I'm just going to keep on going here. So one of the things we can add is safety information. This is all optional, but we can add a specific emergency contact if we have an issue with this piece of equipment. We can identify who prepared this isolation plan, who verified it, and who approved it. There is no workflow around these, simply because we want to keep things as simple as possible for right now. And basically every company we talked to had a different process for doing this. So right now, this is simply a way that we can say, I created this, and then when we have somebody verify it, we can add that so that there's that little bit of accountability and documentation. Each field, again, is optional. So I've just filled out one of them, and it's still allowing me to save. Now, what we're able to do is get into our steps. So here, these are the various locks that we need to install to properly isolate this piece of equipment. If we click on add step, you can see that one step gets added. It defaults to electrical because those are the most common types of isolations that we see. And then we're able to jump in here and modify this a little bit. So here, if we tap on this, you can see that the first question we get asked is, what is our energy source? So here again, we're being prompted to choose electrical. We then have a sort of alphabetical list of other types of energy that we do see isolated. I'll leave it as electrical for now because, again, that's going to be the one we see the most, but something that we can add here. So here, we can describe the energy. I mean, in this case, it's just electrical energy. This energy type field is something where, if you had a hydraulic potential energy that you're isolating, what it's going to be asking you here is what is your fluid type? So you might say hydraulic oil or environmentally friendly hydraulic oil or whatever that sort of source is. Here we might add a high voltage electrical or some other descriptor, but it's a little less important on this one. So let's say we've got a 440 volt system, 120 amps. We're able to choose the location of this lock. And the reason that we ask you this separate from the location of the equipment is that, as we all know, sometimes our breaker boxes and things like that are actually located in other locations. And by adding that here, so our say sector 7B is where our lock is, that's going to help the employee as they go and install that lock to know where they should be looking. If you have a lockout identifier system, again, all of these are optional, but many people have maybe a little label that they print out and put beside each breaker or what have you. You can enter that here. So let's say I'll just pick a sort of random number that's on that. So that's going to help somebody see this. So now our next question is, how do we ensure the equipment is safe for isolation? Pretty straightforward. Basically, we're saying, what do you need to do before you install this lock? So in this case, let's say we need to turn off the pump using red switch on the upper housing. Again, you can be as specific as you want here. To isolate the equipment, we would say install lock on using a breaker lock attachment. That's probably not the correct term for this, and somebody's going to be making fun of me right now, but those little red things that you use to lock out your breakers. And then to verify that this has been installed correctly, turn on the unit using the same red switch and verify that it does not start. Or again, you can make this specific to whatever it is you're doing. Now, the last two things we're going to be asked are, do we require a verification picture? What this is going to ask is that when the employee is installing this lock, it's going to ask them to take a photo of the lock after it's installed. The reason that we ask for this is it does give us the ability to satisfy certain regulators that require visual verification that a lock has been installed. So essentially, the employee installs a lock, they take a photo, the supervisor or anyone who has the appropriate settings to get notified will get a notification, and they'll be able to visually see that the lock has been installed correctly. So here, basically, what this toggle is going to do is it's going to force the employee to take that photo before they can proceed. If we don't select this, it's still going to ask the employee to take a photo, but basically they'll be able to proceed without taking one. That's kind of the difference here. Reference pictures, this is one of the most powerful features that we have in the app. And essentially what this is doing is it's giving us the ability to add images that are going to help the employee understand how they should be installing this lock. So let me add one of these here. Go to my desktop. I think I got a handful of pictures. So let's say this is a photo of what this should look like once you've installed the lock. We can also add a little drawing here, or if we want to. So now we've added that thing, and now we're happy with this step. So this is giving somebody a really clear understanding of how you should be installing the first step of this lock. That's our electrical step. Let me add another one. Let me make this one hydraulic so you can just see that difference. So in this case, we've got pressurized liquid nitrogen. System pressure is very low, 1 psi. We can choose other pressure units if those have been provided. Choose our location. So I'll put this in another place, and I'll give it another lockout identifier. Again, I'll just quickly, or maybe I'll show you here that these are all optional. So again, if you don't want to add all these typed things, that's totally up to you. And in this case, I'm going to require a verification picture. The reason that we make these optional is that we do understand that not everybody has the time to set all this up. and we just want to we want to give the people who really want to have something really beautiful and thorough the ability to enter all of that information, but also for the people who just want to kind of get started that they can do so without slowing things down too much. So I'm going to add a different reference image here. Ironically, this is unequivocally an electrical isolation, but let's not worry about that right now. We'll upload this one as a reference image and we'll say done. So let's say in this case, there's only 2 steps to this isolation. We can save this. And this is going to save this as an isolation plan for that piece of equipment. So if we go back here, you can now see it's taken us back to our secondary fuel pump, and you can see that an isolation plan is now required. So we'll save that. We can now see the status of that equipment. That's now appearing because we've added that isolation plan requirement. If we wanted to lock out this piece of equipment, either for long-term isolation or because we had a job coming up, we could do that by simply clicking right here, and it would give us the ability to get started on that. Obviously, you can also do this as part of a task. So if you do an isolation as part of a task, it's going to be attached to that task, again, if that's appropriate. If you have an isolation that is more preventative or something like that, the way that you would want to log that is by visiting the piece of equipment and isolating it from right here. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to our team and we'll get you sorted out. I want to just quickly go through this here and show you what this looks like from a, if we were to be installing it. Let's look at those steps one by one. So now if I click on our status, we have no isolation history. That's what you're going to be seeing on this page once we get going. So I'm going to add an isolation. It's going to give me a summary. It's going to say, you're about to start an isolation. If you don't know how to isolate this equipment, please stop and contact your supervisor. A little bit of a background there. Again, we can see all this information. As soon as we press start isolation, it's going to send a notification to anybody who gets isolation related notifications to let them know that somebody's somebody's kicked off an isolation, just so that they're aware. If we start this isolation, where it's going to take us is step 1. So here we've got that reference picture that we added. I can see this and I can say, oh, this is what I'm looking for. Again, so often these things are in a big space or a very cluttered space and we don't know what we're looking for. So I can scroll down here. I can see, everything I've got. And that for that one, I didn't need to add the reference picture. So I'm just pressing done to say, I've done all that. I'm good to go. Whereas for this one, I'm seeing boom, 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 and I need to take a clear picture of the installed isolation device before I can proceed. So here you can see I can't finish my isolation. I can't move on without adding a picture. If at this point I said, oh, I started this by accident, I could abandon the isolation. What that's going to do is it's going to reverse our isolation. So we're going to start removing the one lock that we already installed. You can see that the removal has started. We have that whole thing. So let's continue our removal. It's going to take us back to step 1 because we said that we installed that lock. Now we have to verify that we're removing it. And now we're back here and our thing's not isolated. So hopefully that makes sense. We went one step in, we abandon it. It's going to go back and remove that lock before it's going to reset. We now go to our status and just do this one more time. I want to go through the whole process. So first one, no photo required. So we're just able to say all good. Let's move on. For here, we're going to need that verification picture. So I look at the reference picture. I say, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. Awesome. I go in, I install my lock. I pull out my mobile device, maybe intrinsically safe if that's necessary. I click add a picture. If I am accessing this on a mobile device, it's going to trigger the camera. Here I'm doing it on the desktop. So maybe I've taken a photo with a camera or with a mobile device and I've uploaded them to the computer to log it here. So I click add a picture. I'm going to add this one. So I've taken exactly the same photo that was already here. I upload this and this is going to be my verification to that, to my supervisor or to anyone who's going to be coming later that, hey, this is what I was supposed to do. And I followed that. One thing to note, just while I'm here, you can see this is 1 of 1. You do have the ability to add multiple reference photos to a step. What we've seen some people do is they have a photo of maybe the whole room with an arrow pointing to the particular electrical cabinet or wherever where a lock is, and then they have more photos inside that provide a more detailed description. So just something to think about while you're setting this up. So here, again, let's get back to it. So I've added my verification picture. We're all happy. We're going to press done. Now our isolation is installed. We can see that the status is isolated. If we go back to our piece of equipment, if anybody else comes here, they're going to see that this equipment is isolated. If we go back now to our company and we go to isolations, we can also see that I installed one and removed it, and I've now installed it again. So you have that full audit trail of any isolations taking place. I can click on this as a supervisor or a chief engineer or anybody who might be wanting to look at this. I can see that this thing is isolated. If I want to see the specifics of what happened and what was installed, I can tap on isolation history. You can see that the first step was completed, the second step was completed. Tap here to view details. I actually said that backwards. So isolation was started. The first step was completed at this time. 2 minutes later, the second step was completed. And here's the verification photo if you do want to look at that. And then it was fully isolated at this point. So that's going to give you that step-by-step breakdown for the entire isolation process. That's kind of that's kind of the full picture here on creating an isolation and how you create an isolation from a piece of equipment. So again, we created this one for our secondary fuel pump. If we had an isolation that was for a whole system, so maybe we were isolating our entire fuel system, and that was going to include one isolation to every fuel pump and fuel manifold in the entire location. We can also do that. And the way that we do that is we create an isolation plan that's not attached to a piece of equipment. There's the one thing I want to touch on here that I think is important. So if you bear with me, again, the way that we would do that is we would click on isolations and we would click new isolation plan. So we're accessing this flow not by visiting a piece of equipment, but instead by just creating a new isolation plan here. If we created one for main fuel system at the nuclear power plant, again, we don't need to drill down anymore if we don't want to. What I'm going to do here is I'm not going to pick up a quick piece of equipment, and that's just going to give us a lot more flexibility here to not only show that one piece of equipment is isolated. What we're able to do now is add all of our steps. So let's say we've got our electrical step, and I've added some. I'll just not add details here. We've got a hydraulic step. We've got a let me add a requirement for verification photos on each one of these, just so we can see the full potential. Now, verification picture, yes. So we've added this. We could add 100 steps if that's necessary for something like this. Now, when we press save, one thing to note is it's going to we're not going to be able to see anything here because this is only showing us active or historical isolations. It's not a list of isolation plans. If we do want to access this isolation, all we'd have to do is create fuel system maintenance, create our task, and then when we go through our risk assessment process for our task, and we get to that final step, so I'll just kind of skip through here, where we're talking about controls, you'll see that main fuel system is now available as a control. So we've now added that, and you can now see that when we get started, all those 3 steps are there. If we were to start this isolation and record it, I'm just gonna add these Just as an example, obviously this isn't the way you'd want to do it in practice. You're going to want to go around, take those photos, or maybe skip the photos and just provide that verification that you've installed. Again, the photos are totally optional. It doesn't make sense, especially in oil and gas operations where you need to be a little bit more thoughtful about the mobile devices, and you don't have access to intrinsically safe devices. Obviously, that's not going to make sense. But here you can see we're asking for the photos. Because I didn't fill out all that other information, I'm still able to save it. I'm able to make a really simple isolation plan. But again, as we saw earlier, if we wanted to add a bunch more information, we certainly could do that. So here, I'm going to add my final image. It's now going to allow us to finish this isolation. All finished here. We can see that history. We can see all those details. And if we go back now and look at our isolations list, you'll see that our main fuel system isolation is there. So anyone's going to be able to see this, going to be able to access that history or start removing this isolation if that's what they need to do. So hopefully this has been informative. Again, everything you've seen here can also be done on your mobile device. And in many cases, if you are using the photos, either to add photos as reference images or to require a verification photo, a mobile device is absolutely the way to do it if that is available to you. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. And if you do have any questions, please reach out to our team and we'd be happy to help you out. Thank you very much.